Hey there, Cynthia with the Dinner Fix, where I help answer the question, what's for dinner? Today I am making a Mexican regional dish from the state of Yucatan. It's Cochinita pibil, which basically means a suckling pig. And traditionally this pig is marinated with a variety of things, which I'll talk about in a second, but it's slow cooked in a pit underground for hours on end until the pork is fall apart tender. And then you serve it with pickled onions, some hot sauce, and it makes for a really, really good taco. If any of you out there have watched the Taco Chronicles on Netflix, Cochinita Pibil was actually featured, or has been featured, in the second season that just came out about a week or so ago, I think. So it got me thinking maybe I should show you how I make this at home with my slow cooker. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do, and actually this step is optional, so you may end up skipping this, but to kind of get that authentic cochinita flavor, you're going to need some banana leaves, which you can buy in a packet like this at the store. Depending upon your grocer, you may find them fresh like these. You may have to buy them frozen. So if you can't find them like where all the fruits and vegetables are, look in the frozen food section, like where all the vegetables and fruits and things are, and you might find them in there. Traditionally, when this is cooked in the Yucatan, it is the pork is wrapped in banana leaves and steamed in the pit. So this is really going to lend a lot of that authentic flavor. But if you can't get your hands on these, it's okay. You can still make this without it. You may just want to fast forward past this part. So what I like to do, and you can see this is kind of falling apart here. That's perfectly fine. And then what I like doing is just, I don't know if you can tell, but these aren't that pliable. They're a little pliable because these were previously frozen. I had some extra left over from the last time that I made this. But when you get them fresh, they can be really stiff, and we're gonna need to bend these a little bit. So what I like doing, as you can kind of see, is I like taking the leaf and just kind of running it over the open flame. So I'm just running this over pretty quickly, like I'm not letting this linger on the flame, and I'm being super careful not to get my fingers too close to the flame. But you'll just want to run that over, and now you'll see this is super pliable. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, actually let me turn that off. I'm going to take my leaf and I'm gonna put it in my slow cooker insert. And what you want to do is you basically want to position this in the insert so that the bottom is kind of partially covered, and then there's an overhang. If you can see, it kind of looks like that. So I'm just going to proceed to do this with, this is probably going to take maybe another 3 leaves until the bottom is completely covered, and then I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so our banana leaves are ready to go. As you can see, the bottom and sides are completely lined, so it's time to move on to preparing our pork. All right, so I got a little bit ahead of myself. Before we make the marinade for our pork, I want to get started on some onions that I'm going to cook slightly before we continue to cook them in the slow cooker with the pork. So I have here just a 12-inch skillet to which I've added just a little bit of vegetable oil. I have here a white onion that I just sliced from pole to pole, and then I sliced each half into about 1/4 inch thick slices. Now we're just going to cook this down in the vegetable oil for about 5 minutes, just until they begin to soften and start to gain some color. And we're just going to stir those occasionally, but for the most part, just kind of leave those alone for a minute. All right, so now we're going to move on to our marinade. And our marinade is actually a very simple marinade. We're only going to need a few things for this. So the first thing we're going to need is some achiote paste, and this is what it looks like. Achiote paste, if you're not familiar with it, is made from ground annatto seeds blended with just other spices. Actually, if I can kind of show you, it's almost like the consistency of Play-Doh. And this is like the quintessential ingredient that you need in order to be able to make this dish. There really is no substitute for it. And you can find it in kind of like the the Latin aisle of your grocery. You can also order it online. It comes in a little package, and for this recipe, we're going to need about half a package, so you'll have some left over for next time you make it. So to that, we're going to add some fresh squeezed lime juice, some fresh squeezed orange juice, and then a bit of salt. Actually, quite a bit of salt. This is going to make quite a bit of pork. And then we're just going to blend this until it is nice and smooth. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's move that out of the way. There's some space here. Let's take a look at our onions. They're looking pretty good. They're already starting to soften. Whoa, casualty. That happens sometimes. All right, so for this, we are using pork shoulder. Now, the recipe calls for a 3.5 to 4 pound bone-in pork shoulder. I have here pork shoulder with the bone in, although this has actually been trimmed down into about 4-inch-ish chunks. Typically, I make this with a whole pork shoulder, but when I went to the store, everything was like 7-8 pounds, which is far more than I need. So, they had the smaller packages of kind of the already cut up bone-in shoulder. So I'm going to be using this. The only difference will be is that I'll adjust my cooking time on the slow cooker accordingly, because obviously this is going to take less time to cook, being smaller pieces of meat as opposed to one large one. At any rate, we're going to take our marinade and we're just going to pour it all over our pork. Take my tongs, give these a toss, and you just want to coat this so it's nice and evenly coated. All right, so with our pork evenly coated at this point, we're just going to take the pork and we're going to add it to the slow cooker. Just kind of pile it in the center. And this looks absolutely beautiful. You've got kind of the bright green leaves, the bright red marinade. And then the only other thing left to add are those onions that we'd cooked or had been cooking while we made that marinade. As you can see, or hopefully you can see, these have softened up. They started to pick up a little color, not a lot, but we're just going to add those to our pot. Now, normally when I make this, when I kind of cook the onions down, I get a bit of a fond that forms on the bottom of the pan. In which case what I would do is I would take an additional half cup of orange juice, add it to the pan and kind of cook that down to scrape up those bits, and then add that all into the slow cooker so I don't lose any of that flavor. Though that doesn't appear as though it's the case today. So I'm just going to add that half cup of orange juice straight in here. And then what you're going to want to do is these leaves that are kind of hanging over the edge, we're just going to fold those over the pork so that it's enveloped completely, and just kind of tucking it in so that it stays down. And then you're just going to continue folding the leaves over, kind of tucking them in so that you almost have like a packet within the slow cooker stuffed with pork. Clamp the lid on this. Now we're going to turn our slow cooker onto high, and that's it for now. Just going to set that aside. I'm going to let that cook. I'll check it at probably the 4-hour mark. Typically, if I were making this with the whole kind of 3.5 to 4 pound chunk of shoulder, that's going to take 5.5 to 6 hours on high heat. But again, we're working with 4-inch chunks today, so it's going to take a little less. Ultimately, what you're looking for is for the meat to be fall apart tender. So we'll leave that alone, and then later on I'll show you kind of how to finish that up and plate it. In the meantime, I'm going to clean up, and then I'm going to show you how to make the traditional pickled red onions that are a must when serving cochinita pibil. Now, there are two quintessential accompaniments that you must serve with any cochinita pibil. One of them is Habanero Salsa. The other is pickled red onions. So for the latter, what you want to do is you want to take some onion. This is just red onion that I've diced. You can slice this, you can dice this. It's really just personal preference. Today I feel like diced red onion. So we're just going to add that to our bowl. And then we're going to pour some lime juice over it and just let it sit. And that's really all there is to it. We'll kind of give it a stir occasionally just to ensure that the lemon juice coats it fully. But we've got our red onions. I've got some freshly squeezed lime juice here. I'm just gonna pour that over the top. Give this a stir. And that's really all there is to this. I will cover this with plastic wrap, just let it sit on the counter, maybe give it the occasional stir, but in time you'll notice that it's gonna go from being purple like this to pink as it pickles. And this is going to make a really nice counterbalance to the fatty kind of richness of the pork, having kind of that pickled tang from the onions. So we'll set that aside and I'll finish cleaning up. All right, so 4 hours later, our pork is done. So what you're gonna wanna do is, remember those banana leaves from earlier? We're just gonna peel those back. And this smells really, really good, and it's going to look amazing, or it looks amazing. I know it does. So really kind of the last step that we're gonna do here, take a look at that. How good does that look? Pretty good, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a bowl and I'm gonna transfer our pork. Well, look at how fall apart, like tender that is. It's really, really tender. We're gonna transfer this to a bowl. And then what we're gonna do is we're going to reduce the sauce. There's a lot of kind of juice in here, and we're gonna reduce that. And that's like an optional step. I mean, you could just serve this as is at this point. You would just kind of shred the meat and then pile it into tacos or serve it alongside some black beans. But I like reducing the sauce and then kind of tossing it in the meat. So it really coats it. Right now the sauce, as you can see, is pretty thin. And yeah, again, just kind of want to thicken that up. So gonna finish pulling this out. You're gonna get a lot of clean bones because the meat just fell right off. We'll just set those aside. All right, so I've separated our solids, or our meat, from the liquid that it cooked in. And then what I've done is I've poured that liquid into a measuring cup. And as you can see here, hopefully, the fat has started to rise to the top. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna just let this sit for like 5 minutes because we wanna skim as much of that fat off as possible before we reduce this down to thicken the sauce. And while that fat was great while we were cooking this meat in terms of adding flavor and helping retain moisture, I don't really want all that fattiness in my end product in the sauce. While that kind of sits, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a couple of forks and I'm just gonna shred this meat. I mean, as you can see, it's really tender. I mean, I'm not having to try very hard here to kind of shred this into bits. So just gonna shred that up and then remove any bones I may encounter in the process. All right, so to skim the fat off, I really just want to take a spoon. I've got a little ramekin here, and we're just gonna skim that all off until we're just left with the juice. All right, so we skimmed off all of that fat. There was a good 1/2 inch of fat there, if you recall. It's all gone now. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna pour this into, I just have a shallow skillet. We're gonna cook this until this is reduced by half, and then we're gonna toss our shredded pork in this to coat. And I've got that pork just sitting in this bowl. I've put a plate on top of it just to keep it warm, but you could certainly use some foil for that. Okay, so high heat. This is probably gonna take around 10 minutes to reduce, but we'll keep an eye on it. All right, so as you can see, our sauce has reduced by quite a bit. So we're gonna go ahead and turn off the heat. And it's time to eat. So let's move that there. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take our pork, we're gonna take our sauce, and we're just gonna pour the sauce all over the pork. And then we're just gonna give this pork a toss so that it's evenly coated with the sauce. looks and smells amazing. And that's it. That's all there is to it. So I know this makes a lot of pork. Couple of ways you can eat this. You can eat it in a taco. You could pile it on a plate and eat it with some black beans or some rice. It also freezes really well. So, you know, when you make this, portion it out. This is easily going to be maybe 3-4 meals worth for two. So I would just portion it out into individual like Tupperwares, stick it in the fridge. It'll keep for a couple of days. You can also freeze it. It'll keep in the freezer for up to 3 months. But enough talking. Let's go ahead and make a taco. So while the sauce was reducing, I just warmed up some tortillas. If you were eating this in Yucatan, in a taco is, I guess, the most common way that you'll see it featured on a menu. But, you know, you'll also see it just on a plate. You'll see it in tortas. There's all kinds of ways that you can make cochinita. All right, we're going to take our pickled onions, which are almost like a magenta kind of fuchsia color at this point. We're just going to put those on top. And then the other kind of quintessential cochinita pibil ingredient that you need is Habanero sauce. So I like this brand, the Yucateco brand. You can find this. Increasingly, I'm finding this in a lot of grocers. It's usually going to be wherever you find all the hot sauces. It's pretty spicy. They actually have different variations of heat. This is the extra, extra, extra hot. So three X's. So pretty spicy, but they do have some Avanero salsas that aren't quite as spicy. So a couple of drops of this will go a long way. And if you can't find Habanero salsa, you can certainly make your own. It's not that hard to make. I have some here that I've made and just kind of keep in a bottle in the fridge. And this is actually milder than this stuff. Most of this orange is not actually habanero, it's carrot. So not that spicy. It's a little sweet, a little spicy, really, really good. But enough chatting. Let's go ahead and give our taco a taste. This is so good. You get the achiote, that tang from the lime and the orange juice that went in there. Of course, the some of the acidity that you're getting from the pickled onions as well. This is absolutely delicious. I'm gonna keep eating. I hope you make this one at home. Let me know what you think, and until next time, enjoy.